musician,
long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where we interview remarkable people. Today on the show, I have Angela Ferguson, who is an interior designer and the MD of Future Space. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And thank you for having a nice chat to me before we sat here, because I feel that you and I have some nice commonalities, which is kind of exciting. It's like meeting a new friend, you know, when someone arrives. Now, you're an award-winning commercial interior designer. You have actually won a Businesswoman of the Year award through Women in Construction. Now, I didn't even know there was an organization called Women in Construction, and I'm assuming that the idea of that is to promote women within the construction business. What jobs are there for women in construction?
Well, women in construction, so it's a pretty diverse group of women. So construction really includes things like property, includes project management, includes design, it includes architecture, but also includes women in trades. So part of what Women in Construction does is to help more women get into trades, but then also help them once they get into those trades, because it is a pretty blokey industry. And so Women in Construction does work pretty hard to kind of pave the way for women to feel welcome in that sort of environment.
How many, or if any, sort of electricians and plumbers do you actually come across that are women within the construction industry?
There's a few.
Are there?
Yeah, and particularly the young women as well, because I think young women at school are taught that, you know, they can do whatever they want to do. There aren't just jobs for boys and jobs for girls. So there's a lot of younger women who are coming through and who are embracing those trades. There's one particular woman I know who's a really well-known sparky, and she has her own YouTube channel.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's great.
That's pretty cool. What's her name?
Her name's Beck the Sparky.
Beck the Sparky.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to go and look up Beck the Sparky. She sounds pretty exciting.
She is.
So your career currently is working in really big projects with some quite sexy brands. You've got Google, you've got a couple of others that I'm quite happy for you to kind of go ahead and list for us.
So currently we're working with PwC,
Yep.
both in Sydney and in Melbourne. We're also working with realestate.com, which is REA Group, again, both in Sydney and in Melbourne, and we've worked with them for a couple of years.
I expect them to be quite realestate.com for me, for some strange reason. I expect them to be quite a grey company. But if you guys are doing them, have they got quite a sexy interior theme going on?
They're a disruptor in their industry, because they're all about tech, and they're all about changing the way that people buy and sell properties. So they've really disrupted that whole classifieds market in Australia. And they're a tech company, so they're kind of energetic, they're agile, they're sexy, they're smart people. They're really, really kind of a great company to work with.
I saw something recently where commercial interiors were embracing the idea of hospitality style elements within them. Is this something that you found is a trend within the businesses that you're working with?
Yeah, I think the way that we work is that we work predominantly in commercial, so predominantly in workplace. And the way that we look at it is that we spend a third of our lives at work. And a lot of the workplaces that I've seen are pretty awful, depressing places to be. And so we look at kind of bringing all of those great elements of hospitality and home and recreation and social, and we bring all of those elements into the spaces that we design, so that our workplaces are much more human-centered places and places that people, feel like they can actually thrive.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Angela Ferguson, an interior designer and MD of Future Space. What's the grooviest place that you've done? Like, what's the edgiest? Which company kind of gave you a bit more of a kind of carte blanche and you came up with something a bit left of centre?
Yeah, I think the first kind of job we did like that really put us on the map was Google.
Okay.
And they're renowned all around the world for their workplaces, and that was such a big win for us to kind of win that project to work with Google. More recently, it was REA, it was realestate.com, because they are very agile in the way they think, but also in the way they behave. So it was really kind of a groundbreaking type of workplace that we designed for them. And currently the work we're doing with PwC is it's pretty amazing. It's designing their client spaces for them in Sydney and in Melbourne. So they're big, kind of 4 floors, 10,000 square metres, big interconnecting stairs through each set of 4 floors. But they're bringing into that the best of technology and hospitality. So so imagine if you went to a really big, fantastic hotel in Dubai with all the sort of excellent service and beautiful design, and then you overlaid like Minority Report into that. So the technology that's overlaid onto that it's going to be phenomenal.
It's very exciting. I believe that I have a friend who works there and says that they are a disruptor within the industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything about what they do is about change and about creating something new and looking at new ways of doing it. So it must be very exciting to work there. I'm going to take you back to your childhood and find out sort of what pinged you in those days to kind of develop into who you are today. And from what I understand, it was challenging upbringing, single mother, and you grew up in one of those environments that you said just kind of was a suburb in the country in Victoria that just developed, just kind of out of the earth.
Yeah.
How was that? How was growing up in that environment?
Well, it was pretty amazing, actually. We had a lot of freedom. So I was the oldest of 4 kids, and it was Australia during the 70s. And if you kind of do any research on Australia in the 70s, it was a pretty amazing place. It was very liberal, a lot of new ideas, a lot of construction going on. The Opera House was being built at the time. And so I think partly because of the time, but partly also because I had a single mum. My sister and my 2 brothers and I, we just roamed free in that environment. So we pretty much spent our childhood playing on construction sites, and I loved that. And I think that's kind of what gave me my start in, I guess, creating new spaces where previously they'd been nothing. It sort of gave me that kind of start in that area.
You had some challenges growing up with substance abuse in your family that you found really, really hard. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, I think at the time, so my father was an alcoholic, and I think at the time we didn't know that wasn't normal.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until, I guess, I moved out of home when I was 18, which now I think is so young. I can't believe I did that. But so I've been kind of looking after myself from a pretty young age. And it wasn't until, I sort of grew up and moved out and started to see a bit more of the world that I realised that wasn't normal, and that I had learnt some bad sort of behaviours and traits from growing up in that environment. So I had to unlearn a lot of sort of negative stuff, I guess. Yeah.
You are married now. You have a blended family. You have 3 adult children and 1 of your own children. Have you found that relationship easier to manage, given that you've gone through some sort of unlearning process along the way, or do you find that some of your history creeps into your current relationship?
Yeah, well, I think I tell you, having stepkids, so having the 3 kids, because they were 5, 7, and 8 when I met them. And lots of people used to say to me, "Oh, you're so brave, kind of taking all that on." And it's like, well, actually, I didn't really think about it, because I think if I had have thought about it, I may not have done it. But it actually taught me a lot, because, these kids were they were struggling with something themselves. And as much as I didn't want to be, I had to be the grown-up in the situation. So, and I always kind of wondered, how did I sort of end up in this situation, and why has my life sort of turned out this way? But I feel like I was kind of in their life for a reason, and they were in my life for a reason. So they taught me so much about kind of being a grown-up and just being an adult when sometimes I actually don't want to be.
I think we all grow up not wanting to be adults any longer.
Yeah.
You went to school and actually loved it. You loved learning. You thought that was fantastic, but you found that you were a bit different from everyone else and were bullied.
Yes. Yeah, I think because I grew up in the country, I went to school in the city in Melbourne, and being a creative person as well, I was a bit different from the other girls, and I kind of wanted to be the cool girls. I wanted to be with that group, but I think it was that sort of classic sort of Mean Girls situation, really, that sort of scenario where if you're different, that's sort of what's honed in on and kind of magnified and made to be a bad thing, when actually I think my difference is what's kind of special about me now,
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and the Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Angela Ferguson, an interior designer and MD of Future Space. You talk about being authentic, and you believe in that authenticity of, who you are. Why is that so important?
Well, I think if I'm not authentic, then I'm just not being myself, and I don't feel right. And I found that when I joined Future Space, I thought, because I'd had my own business prior to that, which was pretty creative, and I just sort of took risks and had a go and, put myself out there. And when I joined Future Space, it was sort of, it was very corporate, and I thought that I had to be very corporate, and I had to be this woman who kind of competed amongst the boys. And it just didn't feel right, and I feel like I didn't really win as much work either, because other people could really pick up on that as well. And as soon as I started just saying, well, no, this is like to myself, like this is kind of who I am, this is what I have to offer, and if people want to take that up, then that's great, but if they don't, then obviously it's not a right fit. And as soon as I started doing that, I feel like it really made a big difference in the success of my business. So that was sort of a byproduct of me being just being myself.
You also believe in risk-taking to some degree. And I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are risk-adverse, and I imagine within your industry also quite a lot of people who probably are not authentic. You've got all the blokes who probably are, but I think there's within that sort of that top tier, you would find quite a few people who are not authentic. But talking about risks, let's talk about some of the risks. Where have you found that in life you've leapt and it's kind of worked out okay?
I think probably one of the most recent ones was winning the PwC work, because we won that work probably about 2 years ago, and the sort of the opportunity for us was to show them what we could do. And like, they're a big global corporate, they're the top practice in the big four accounting firms, and that can be intimidating. But I think when we sort of put that pitch together, rather than let that intimidate us, we just went, well, here's what we think would be a great opportunity for them that we can share with them and we can help them with. So we sort of put this pitch together that did take a few risks, and we showed them how we could really create an experience for them. And because sometimes too, you'll sort of do things and think, oh, that's a bit daggy, or that's a bit embarrassing, and I just kind of went, well, let's just not worry about that. Let's just do what we think is going to be the best way to create an experience for them. And it was amazing how it paid off, because the feedback that came back from them was that you so obviously wanted us to have an experience. We put ourselves out there, like we put our heart and soul on the line.
And that worked for you?
Definitely, yeah.
After school, you left and you decided that you thought maybe you wanted to be a graphic designer, which of course is a very natural sort of, step. But that didn't work out for you. That wasn't something that you wanted to do. What made you make that decision that you wanted to swap?
I think it was mostly because it was more two-dimensional than anything else. And I really loved spaces, and I really loved how spaces made me feel, and I loved how you could kind of walk into an environment and just be affected by that in either a positive or a negative way. And so I wanted to have more say over my environment. And part of it too was that I had seen offices, and at that time, sort of the 80s, like, offices were pretty awful places. And I thought, oh my God, there is no way I want to work in an office. I'm going to have some control over wherever I end up working for the rest of my life. So I want to design spaces, and I wanted to design offices.
Talking about control, one of the things you said to me was that one of the ways that a woman can actually have a balanced life with a family and a business is to own your own business, is to actually set the tone for how you're going to do that. Was that a consideration when you went into your own business in the beginning? Were you thinking about that, or was that something that you suddenly realized was an absolute bonus? Yeah,
I think it was more that I realized it was a bonus. I started my own business because I wanted to do things my way, as you do. And then I realised soon after that when I wanted to have a family, it could actually give me the real flexibility that I needed to be able to do that. So it was more like an added bonus later on.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and the Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Angela Ferguson, an interior designer and MD of Future Space. Your business, which was Ferguson Design Studio, actually merged with Future Space, and you became the MD of Future Space. Future Space was originally owned by your husband as one of the partners within a group of 4.
Yeah.
So that obviously was a massive shift for the two of you. You suddenly went from running your own business to actually being the MD of a much bigger business. How's that change been for you? And what is it like working with your husband?
Yes. Well, that's a challenge, and we've had to. It's funny though, because I think it can be a negative thing or a positive thing, and a lot of people say to us, "Oh, I don't know how you could work with your husband. That would be so difficult." But he's an architect, and I'm an interior designer, and we both love what we do, and neither of us thinks that what we do is a job, and neither of us really considers retiring. We sort of just consider restructuring. But I actually think, it's been positive for our relationship, because it's meant that we've had to, there's no escape. And so we've really had to work on the things that don't go so well and really be appreciative of the stuff that's really good between us. And we've learnt to, put boundaries around things and kind of compartmentalise work and make sure that we do have good time together and family time. And so I think it's actually made us work harder on our relationship and not be lazy about it.
Well, there's too many people that have that sort of get out of jail free card, don't they? Well, I'll get married, and then if it doesn't work out, well, it's okay. We can just sort of get out of it. Yeah. And maybe everybody needs to work together, and although I think there'd be a few more domestic deaths. I think.
Yes, exactly.
No, it's not for everyone. We were talking about the challenges within the business, challenges that you feel, and you were saying that one of the things that you found really difficult was learning the finance side of the business, because no one ever taught you.
No, not at all. Well, I went to Catholic school, and we did home economics and religion and sewing.
Did they think you were going to grow up and just marry somebody nice? I
think so.
Right,
yes,
okay.
Yes.
Getting you ready for marriage?
Yes. But yeah, so I never did, and I did maths. And I really enjoyed doing maths, but I didn't. It was never anything about sort of managing a business or balancing a checkbook or any of that sort of thing. And at university, we never learnt any of that either. And so everything I've learnt financially, I've learnt through making mistakes, pretty much. And that has been the hardest part for me of running the business, is understanding the language too. It's sort of this whole other language that I'd never heard of, and like balance sheets and P&L and all of that sort of, that's the sort of stuff I really had to learn, and kind of learn the hard way as well.
You said that you learnt, you reached out to somebody in a business group, and they sort of helped you quite a bit. Talk to me about mentors and business groups and how you've kind of got support in your role, because being a woman in this commercial design area, you're kind of quite lonely.
Yeah, definitely. And especially at my level too, because there's not many other women, running practices, but especially in architecture and design. Actually, I just interviewed someone this morning for a new position who's come from a big architectural practice, and his entire board of directors is men in their 50s and 60s. There's no diversity there at all, and that's pretty common. But in terms of mentoring, I have, for about 3 years now, I've been part of a group called Behind Closed Doors, and they operate all around Australia. But we have this really, close-knit group of about 6 to 8 women, and we meet monthly. We have a half-a-day session every month, and everyone is from different, really diverse, different types of businesses, and we spend a lot of time just working together through all the challenges that we're facing as women in senior roles. So I'm constantly amazed. Every session I sit and just kind of look around the room at the end of every session and think, this is an amazing, talented group of women, and I have to actually include myself in that group as well.
You're quite humble, because when we were originally speaking, you said to me that when you finished your design course, you were put forward for a job, and you couldn't understand why they'd put you forward.
Yeah.
I think I responded with, maybe you were good enough.
Yes.
So you probably need to own some of the wins for yourself. But obviously, being, having that attitude that you're quite humble and love the work seems to be working for you, because you're out there and you're definitely doing it. You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and the Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Angela Ferguson, an interior designer and MD of Future Space. You are involved you're on the board of a Sydney rehab centre in Dural.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about what that means for you and what you're doing out there.
Yeah, so what we're doing, so it's a board of directors, and what we're doing is we're getting a new rehab facility up and running. So it's a long-term rehab.
I'm just going to say it's a drug and alcohol rehab centre.
Yeah, so drug and alcohol rehab. Yep. So it's a centre that we're in the sort of early stages of getting up and running in Dural in New South Wales.
Why there?
Well, it's actually been really hard to find a property for a start, and then also because of the type of property it is, and the type of building code that it comes under. So we've looked at, there are people on the board who are from real estate backgrounds. We've looked at property all across New South Wales.
Oh, interesting.
And it's actually a really lovely site, but it's been hard to find the property that kind of meets all of our needs.
From a point of funding it and running it and all the rest of it, how is that going to affect you?
Well, there's sort of two ways that we're looking at it. So we've got some backers who have put some funds aside for the setup and then the operation. But then we're also looking at some opportunities too around things like crowdfunding and how do we sort of get other people. There'll be a cost to come and attend this rehab as well. But we're kind of looking at a whole sort of different range of ways to bring some funding into the centre to not only get it up and running, but to keep it going and keep it maintained.
Is this a way for you to continue that healing process and that transformative process for yourself because of the way that you grew up?
Yeah, I think, it means a lot to me.
I understand that.
Yeah, I see so many people affected by it, and I see a lot of people who, I guess, sort of are just, managing, in inverted commas, with these sorts of things in their lives, but not really kind of going forward. And so I really would like more people to have the opportunity to kind of get well from that sort of situation and to live the life that they were meant to live and to realise the potential, because we all start from the same place. We're all kind of, that moment we're born, we're all kind of starting from that same point, but everyone kind of for various different reasons goes in different directions and has different set of circumstances that affect them. So, I'd really like everyone to be able to get the opportunity to live a really kind of well and healthy life.
I think it's worth mentioning that, alcohol and drugs, it's a disease.
Absolutely.
And that people are often not able to control for themselves. And I think I always find that really difficult when I hear people being cruel or unkind towards people who do suffer from these things, because it's often sometimes not a choice. Sometimes you're just overtaken by those needs, and they're not great needs, and that's really, really difficult. You have a 8-year-old, 9-year-old. You raised some girls for your.
Yes.
So, do you think the process of having a son is easier? I mean, do you see talent in him? Do you think he's going to grow up to be a bit like mum and dad?
Oh, absolutely. He is very creative, and he's very sort of outside the box. But what I love about him is that, apart from the fact that he's, the best and the worst bits of both me and my husband, he's so self-assured, and he's just so confident in himself and who he is. And I love that I've been able to give him the opportunity to feel like that. So I feel like, I've kind of achieved something by providing this environment for him where he's really safe to be who he is, because he's like me as a kid. He's a little bit different than the other kids, and when he was quite young he loved pink, and he would wear tutus every day, and he'd wear all of his grandmother's jewellery, and but he's very comfortable doing that. So I just love that he's able to be who he is, not have anyone kind of bully him or tease him or make him feel bad about that.
You left Victoria, you left Melbourne to come and live in Sydney. You wanted the weather, you wanted the ocean, you wanted a whole lot of those things. And you said that at the end, when that job ended for you, you kind of had nothing. You felt like you had nothing and you needed to make a change. It's interesting when you have those watershed moments. What made you decide that Sydney was where you were going to go and that this was going to be the successful place for you?
Yeah, well, I actually wanted to go and live in New York because growing up in the country, for some reason I love big cities. And so I thought, if I am going to go and live in New York, I need to go and sort of test. And so I'll go and live in Sydney first. And what happened, though, was that I came here and my life just kind of came together. I sort of met this amazing group of people and my career took off and I met my husband and, it was just before the Sydney Olympics, actually, which was that magical time in Sydney when everyone just seemed to be in love and the city was perfect and the public transport was perfect and it was gorgeous. So I kind of, was sort of on my way to New York via Sydney, but I stayed here because I don't know, I do love it here. It's a gorgeous city.
It is a beautiful city. I think we're very lucky.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, we're coming towards the end of the interview, but I really want to know your home.
Yes.
What is your home like? Is it an architectural wonderment or is it just a comfortable space? What is it like?
It's a bit of a work in progress, actually, because I've always got something else I want to do. We live in this beautiful apartment and it's kind of my favourite period of design and architecture, which is that real sort of 50s, 60s modernist style. So we've got big timber sliding doors and lots of natural light and great connection to the outdoors. But I've always got something else I want to do, or more furniture, or like I'm in love with herringbone parquetry floors at the moment. So I'm just trying to think, how can I get those somewhere in the house? And so it's gorgeous, and I love it, and I try not to be dissatisfied with it, but it is still a work in progress. There's always something else I want to do.
We've come to the end of the interview. And I could probably ask you, as I say to everyone that comes into the studio, we talk about remarkable people, and listening to your story has been so beautiful. You've been so honest, and just hearing your process and the fact that you love what you're doing has been really fantastic for me. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. It's been lovely.